They had 3 minutes to kill a hero. Then this happened. They were going to kill a hero. Not with a bullet, not in some blazing shootout under streetlights, but with a clean needle in a cold, sterile room. Rex, once the most decorated German shepherd in Dallas police history, now sat trembling behind metal bars, 3 minutes away from lethal injection. The vet's hands were steady, but her face was tight with doubt. On the other side of those bars, Rex didn't bark, didn't growl. He just stared with those knowing, intelligent eyes, as if he understood exactly what was about to happen. What the people in that room didn't know was the truth about the attack that had landed him there. They didn't know about the little girl whose life hung in the balance, or the split-second decision that had transformed a hero into a villain in their eyes. They were about to execute the very dog who had risked everything to save a child, and time was running out. The morning sun painted golden stripes across the polished concrete floor of the Dallas Police Department K-9 training facility as Rex executed what could only be described as poetry in motion. His powerful frame moved with the fluid precision of a seasoned professional, every muscle coordinated in perfect harmony as he tracked the scent trail through the mock warehouse setup. The assembled crowd of rookie officers, seasoned detectives, and visiting law enforcement officials watched in respectful silence, understanding they were witnessing something extraordinary. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain James Morrison's voice carried across the facility with evident pride. "What you're seeing is the result of 8 years of partnership between man and animal, trust and training, instinct and intelligence." His weathered hand gestured toward the German shepherd who had just located the hidden cache of mock narcotics in less than 30 seconds. K-9 Rex isn't just a dog. He's a decorated officer with more solved cases than most human detectives. Rex sat at perfect attention beside the discovered contraband, his dark eyes alert and professional, ears forward, waiting for his handler's next command. There was something almost regal about his posture, a quiet confidence that spoke of countless successful operations, dangerous situations navigated, and lives saved. The white blaze on his chest caught the light like a badge of honor, and his thick coat bore the subtle scars of service, a small nick on his left ear from a suspect's desperate swipe, a barely visible mark on his shoulder from pushing through broken glass to reach a trapped child. "Rex has been instrumental in over 50 major drug busts," Morrison continued, his voice thick with the emotion that came from years of watching. And the dog's tail gave the slightest wag, their private signal of mutual respect and understanding. In the audience, Detective Sarah Chen leaned forward, mesmerized. She'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone in Dallas PD had. Rex was a legend, the dog who'd found the missing senator's daughter in an abandoned subway tunnel, who'd detected the bomb in the courthouse that would have killed dozens, who'd taken a bullet meant for Morrison during a drug raid and still managed to apprehend the shooter. But seeing him work was something else entirely. "The bond you're witnessing," Morrison said, kneeling beside Rex and placing a gentle hand on the dog's head, "isn't just professional, it's family. Rex doesn't just work with me. He trusts me with his life, and I trust him with mine." The German shepherd leaned almost imperceptibly into his handler's touch, a small gesture that spoke volumes about their partnership. As the demonstration concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Morrison remained with Rex in the training area, running through their post-exercise routine. The dog's breathing was steady, controlled. 8 years of service hadn't diminished his endurance or enthusiasm. If anything, experience had made him more efficient, more intuitive. "Good boy," Morrison murmured, his voice carrying the weight of countless shared dangers and victories. Rex's ears perked at the praise, his tail wagging with genuine pleasure. But there was something else in the captain's voice that morning, a tightness that the perceptive animal detected immediately. Morrison had been briefing with the lieutenant about a new case, something big, something dangerous. Rex could smell the stress hormones, could sense the change in his handler's body language. Neither of them knew that in just 6 months, their legendary partnership would be shattered by betrayal, bureaucracy, and a moment of heroism that would cost Rex everything he'd ever known. The warehouse operation that was already being planned in the lieutenant's office would change both their lives forever. Though on this golden morning, surrounded by admiration and respect, such a future seemed impossible to imagine. The October night air carried the acrid smell of industrial decay and something else. Something that made Rex's nostrils flare with concern as he and Morrison approached the abandoned warehouse complex on the outskirts of Dallas. The moon was new, leaving the world draped in shadows that seemed to shift and breathe with malevolent purpose. Morrison's tactical vest rustled softly as he adjusted his radio, his breathing slightly elevated in the way that always preceded dangerous operations. "Control, this is Morrison and K9 Rex, approaching the north entrance," the complex symphony of scents emanating from the building. The usual warehouse smells of rust, concrete, and stale air were overwhelmed by sharp chemical odors that triggered every instinct he'd developed over 8 years of drug interdiction work. But underneath those familiar danger signals was something else, something wrong. His internal alarm system, honed by countless operations, was screaming warnings that his human partner couldn't yet perceive. Morrison noticed Rex's unusual agitation immediately. The dog's normal pre-operation excitement was replaced by something more primal, more urgent. Rex kept looking up at his handler with an intensity that seemed to communicate far more than simple readiness. His body language spoke of imminent danger in a way that Morrison had learned never to ignore. "Easy, boy," Morrison murmured, though he found himself checking his weapon and scanning the shadows more carefully. Rex's instincts had saved his life more than once, and the dog's current behavior was unlike anything he'd seen before. They moved through the maze of abandoned machinery and rusted shipping containers, Rex leading with the careful precision that had made him famous throughout the department. But with each step deeper into the complex, the German shepherd's agitation increased. His hackles rose almost imperceptibly, and Morrison caught the subtle change in his partner's gait. Rex was favoring his right rear leg slightly, the way he did when preparing to spring into action. The warehouse interior was a cavern of shadows and industrial detritus. Moonlight filtered through broken windows high above, creating a patchwork of silver and black across the concrete floor. The chemical smell was overwhelming now, a cocktail of methamphetamine precursors, cleaning solvents, and something else, something metallic and dangerous, that Rex's trained nose identified as explosive compounds. Morrison was studying a collection of industrial equipment when Rex did something unprecedented in their 8-year partnership. He barked, not the controlled, alert bark that signaled a find, but a sharp, urgent warning bark that echoed through the cavernous space like a gunshot. Then, without waiting for a command, Rex lunged forward and slammed his full weight into Morrison's legs, driving his handler backward just as the world exploded into chaos. The blast wave hit them like a physical wall, the carefully placed charges detonating in sequence to bring down the warehouse's main support structure. Morrison felt himself flying backward, Rex's powerful body still pressed against him, driving him away from the collapsing ceiling. Time slowed to a crawl as chunks of concrete and twisted metal rained down around them. Rex's final act of protection came at the cost of his own safety. As Morrison rolled to safety behind a massive concrete pillar, Rex was caught by a falling beam, the weight of reinforced concrete. Sickening crunch. The dog's yelp of pain cut through the thunderous roar of the collapse, a sound that would haunt Morrison for the rest of his life. When the dust settled and the echo of destruction finally faded, Morrison crawled through the rubble to reach his partner. Rex lay pinned beneath the concrete beam, his dark eyes still alert but clouded with pain. The German shepherd's rear leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, and Morrison could see the telltale signs of serious nerve damage. But even in agony, Rex's first instinct was to look toward his handler to ensure Morrison was safe. "Rex! Oh God, Rex!" Morrison whispered, his voice breaking as he tried desperately to shift the beam. "Hold on, partner! Hold on!" The sound of approaching sirens filled the night air, but Morrison knew that even the fastest response might not be fast enough. As he cradled Rex's head in his hands, feeling the warm blood seeping through the dog's coat, he realized that this moment, this act of pure heroic instinct, might have saved his life, but could cost Rex everything that had ever mattered to the noble animal: his career, his purpose, his identity as a protector and guardian. The sterile smell of the veterinary hospital was a sharp contrast to the industrial decay and explosive residue that still seemed to cling to Morrison's uniform. Dr. Elizabeth Harper emerged from the surgical suite after 3 hours of operation, her scrubs stained with blood and her expression carrying the weight of difficult news. Morrison had spent those hours pacing the small waiting room, replaying the warehouse explosion over and over, seeing Rex's heroic lunge in slow motion, hearing that anguished yelp echoing in his mind. "Captain Morrison?" Dr. Harper's voice was gentle but professional. "Rex is stable, but I need to discuss his condition with you." Morrison's heart clenched as he studied the veterinarian's face, reading the carefully controlled expression that medical professionals wore when delivering life-changing news. "How bad is it?" "The nerve damage to his right hindquarter is extensive," Dr. Harper explained, pulling up X-rays on the wall-mounted light box. "We were able to repair the bone fractures, but the crushed nerves, Captain, they may never fully heal. Rex will walk, but his mobility will be permanently compromised. More importantly for a working dog, his speed and agility are significantly reduced." The words hit Morrison like another explosion. He stared at the X-rays showing the metal pins now holding Rex's bones together, the surgical repairs that had saved the leg but couldn't restore the lightning-fast reflexes that had made Rex legendary. "What does this mean for his career?" Dr. Harper's silence answered the question before she spoke. "He'll need to undergo..." Stood in the same training facility where Rex had once demonstrated his legendary skills to amazed audiences. But this morning, there was no crowd, no admiration, just the clinical assessment of the departmental veterinarian and fitness evaluator. Rex tried valiantly to complete the obstacle course, his determination undiminished, despite the obvious limitations of his injured leg. He cleared the low hurdles, but stumbled on the higher ones, completed the scent tracking, but at a pace that would be dangerously inadequate in the field. "I'm sorry, Captain," the evaluator said quietly. "Canine Rex fails to meet the minimum physical standards for continued active duty. Effective immediately, he's classified as medically retired." The administrative processing that followed was a masterclass in bureaucratic coldness. Rex's badge was returned to the department, his locker cleaned out, his service record filed away, as if 8 years of heroism could be reduced to paperwork. There was no ceremony, no recognition of his final act of courage, no acknowledgement that this failed evaluation was the direct result of saving his partner's life. Morrison's apartment lease explicitly prohibited large dogs, a restriction he'd never worried about while Rex lived in the department kennels. His ex-wife's new place was even smaller, and she'd made it clear that Rex wasn't welcome. The captain spent sleepless nights researching alternatives, calling in favors, exploring every possible option to keep his partner. "There's a sanctuary in Tennessee," Lieutenant Rodriguez explained during their final meeting. "Happy Valley Canine Retirement Home. It's specifically for retired police and military working dogs. Rex will have space to run, other working dogs for company, and handlers who understand his background. The transport company has an excellent reputation." Morrison looked at Rex, who sat at perfect attention despite everything that had happened, still maintaining the professional bearing that had defined his career. The dog's trust was absolute. He believed his handler would make the right decision, would ensure his welfare, as he had always done. The morning of departure arrived with brutal Texas sunshine that seemed to mock the somber occasion. Rex waited patiently in the departmental courtyard as the transport van pulled up, his tail wagging slightly at the prospect of a car ride. He had no way of knowing this journey would be unlike any other. "Take care of him," Morrison whispered to the transport handler, a gruff man who nodded without making eye contact. "He's family." Morrison knelt beside Rex for what he believed would be their final goodbye. The German shepherd's dark eyes held complete trust, and his tail wagged with genuine happiness at the attention. Rex had no concept of betrayal, no understanding that the system he'd served faithfully was about to abandon him. "You're a good boy, Rex. The best partner I ever had," Morrison's voice cracked as he buried his face in the dog's thick fur. "You're going to love Tennessee, wide open spaces, other dogs to play with. You deserve the best retirement, buddy." Rex licked his handler's face once, gently, then walked calmly toward the transport van. His limp was barely noticeable. The injury that had ended his career was invisible to casual observation, making his forced retirement seem even more cruel and arbitrary. As the van pulled away, Morrison watched through the rear window until Rex's noble profile disappeared around the corner. He told himself he'd made the right choice, that Rex would be happy and safe in Tennessee. He had no way of knowing that the transport company would never reach the sanctuary, that 50 miles outside of Dallas, they would open the van door on a rural roadside and drive away, leaving Canine Rex, hero, protector, and faithful servant, alone and abandoned in a world that no longer had any use for his kind of loyalty. The Texas sun crested the horizon like a merciless eye, casting long shadows across the empty stretch of Highway 287 where Rex had been waiting for 14 hours. His body remained in the perfect stay position he'd been trained to maintain, even as the transport van had disappeared into the darkness the night before. Every muscle in his powerful frame spoke of discipline, of a lifetime spent following orders and trusting that his handler would return for him. But as the morning heat began to shimmer off the asphalt and the distant hum of traffic grew louder, something fundamental shifted in Rex's understanding of the world. The German shepherd's ears twitched at every approaching engine, his head turning with desperate hope each time headlights appeared on the horizon. Yet vehicle after vehicle passed without slowing, their occupants unaware that a decorated police officer sat abandoned on the roadside like discarded cargo. By the time the sun reached its zenith, Rex's training began to war with a more primal instinct, survival. His water dish from the transport had been knocked over during the night and his tongue felt thick and dry. The injured leg that had ended his career throbbed with a dull ache that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. For the first time in his 8 years of service, Rex faced a terrible truth. No one was coming for him. The realization didn't come all at once. Instead, it crept in like the Texas heat, gradual, inexorable, and ultimately overwhelming. Rex's disciplined mind fought against the growing certainty that he had been abandoned, that the system he'd served faithfully had cast him aside like a broken tool. His dark eyes, once filled with the confidence of purpose and partnership, now held a flicker of something he'd never experienced before: uncertainty. When a rusted pickup truck slowed as it passed, Rex's heart leaped with desperate hope. The driver, a weathered man in a John Deere cap, rolled down his window and studied the German shepherd with a mixture of curiosity and concern. But when Rex approached the vehicle with his characteristic professional bearing, the man's expression changed to wariness. "Easy there, big fella," the stranger called out, his voice carrying the cautious tone people used around unpredictable dogs. "You somebody's pet, or you going wild out here?" Rex sat at attention and offered his paw, the greeting behavior that had charmed countless civilians during community outreach events. But without his police vest, without Morrison beside him explaining his background and purpose, Rex was just another large, intimidating dog on a lonely highway. The man shook his head and drove away, leaving Rex alone with the growing understanding that his identity, his very sense of self, had been tied to symbols and partnerships that no longer existed. Hunger gnawed at his belly as the afternoon wore on, a sensation Rex hadn't experienced since his early training days. His injured leg made walking painful, each step sending sharp reminders of the warehouse collapse and the heroic act that had cost him everything. But survival demanded movement, demanded action, demanded that he abandon his post and begin the bewildering process of living without purpose or direction. The abandoned Texaco station appeared like a mirage in the distance, its faded red star logo barely visible against the rust-stained concrete. Rex approached with the tactical awareness that 8 years of police work had ingrained in his very DNA. He checked for threats, assessed escape routes, evaluated the structure for shelter potential. The training was automatic, unconscious. The professional habits of a warrior applied to the desperate needs of a castaway. Behind the station, beneath a corrugated metal overhang that had once sheltered customers from Texas storms, Rex found a patch of cracked concrete that offered both concealment and protection from the elements. The space smelled of motor oil and decay, of dreams deferred and businesses failed, a fitting refuge for a hero whose service had been forgotten. As night fell and the temperature began to drop, Rex curled into the tightest ball his large frame would allow, his thick coat providing some insulation against the desert chill. But it wasn't the cold that made him shiver. It was the complete absence of everything that had defined his existence. No evening briefings, no equipment checks, no comfortable kennel shared with other working dogs. No Morrison's gentle voice saying "good boy" as they prepared for another day of service. In the darkness, Rex's memories played like fragments of a dream. The warehouse explosion, Morrison's face filled with gratitude and grief, the sterile smell of the veterinary hospital, the transport van that was supposed to carry him to safety but had instead delivered him to abandonment. Each memory felt both vivid and unreal, like scenes from someone else's life. A coyote distance. Rex's ears perked at the wild sound, recognizing it as both a warning and an invitation. The songs of creatures who had never known partnership, never served anything greater than their own survival. For the first time in his life, Rex understood their language of isolation and self-reliance. As sleep finally claimed him, Rex's last conscious thought was of Morrison's promise. "You're going to love Tennessee." The bitter irony wasn't lost on the intelligent animal. He was indeed in the countryside, with wide open spaces stretching endlessly in every direction. But this wasn't the comfortable retirement he'd been promised. This was exile, pure and simple. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons in living without the structure and purpose that had shaped every day of his adult life. The abandoned gas station creaked and settled around him like a tomb for discarded dreams, sheltering a forgotten hero who was about to learn that sometimes survival requires becoming someone entirely new. 3 weeks had transformed Rex from a confused, abandoned police dog into something else entirely. A ghost that moved through the residential streets of Riverside, Texas, with silent purpose. His injured leg had adapted to the constant walking, the muscles compensating for the nerve damage in ways that made his limp less pronounced, but never less painful. The abandoned gas station remained his base of operations, but his territory had expanded to encompass the entire town, mapped and memorized with the precision of a tactical reconnaissance. It was during one of these self-appointed patrol routes that Rex first saw her. Emma Rodriguez was 7 years old, with dark hair that caught the morning sunlight like spun silk, and a laugh that carried the pure joy of childhood across the quiet neighborhood streets. She lived in a modest yellow house on Maple Street, with a front porch that sagged slightly, and a garden where sunflowers grew in defiant abundance despite the Texas heat. But what captured Rex's attention and triggered every protective instinct he possessed was Emma's favorite playground, the network of storm drains and concrete channels that crisscrossed Riverside like arteries of potential disaster. From his concealed position behind a cluster of oleander bushes, Rex watched the little girl sail paper boats down the gentle current of rainwater that still flowed from the previous week's storm. She moved with the fearless confidence of childhood, balancing on concrete edges that would challenge an adult's stability, reaching into dark openings to retrieve her tiny vessels when they became trapped by debris. Rex's training kicked in automatically. He assessed the dangers with professional precision: slippery concrete surfaces, unstable footing, deep channels that could trap a small child, storm grates that led to underground networks where a person could become lost forever. Every instinct between the child and the countless hazards she couldn't perceive. But Rex was no longer a police dog with authority and purpose. He was a stray, a wanderer without credentials or welcome. When Mrs. Patterson from the corner house spotted him watching Emma play, her reaction was immediate and predictable. "Shoo, get away from here," she called out, waving a dish towel like a weapon. "Emma, honey, come away from that dog. He looks dangerous." Rex retreated with dignified silence. His professional pride stung, but his protective instincts unchanged. He would watch from farther away, maintain surveillance without triggering the community's fears. The little girl's safety was more important than their misunderstanding of his intentions. Emma, however, seemed to possess the intuitive wisdom that children sometimes display around animals. When Mrs. Patterson wasn't looking, she would glance in Rex's direction with curious eyes that held no fear, only a gentle recognition that this was no ordinary stray dog. Once, she even left half of her peanut butter sandwich on the edge of the storm drain before being called inside for lunch. Rex approached the offering with careful precision, checking for threats before accepting the food. The sandwich was warm from small hands and tasted of kindness, the first human gesture of care he'd experienced since Morrison's final goodbye. As he ate, Rex studied the little girl through the kitchen window, memorizing her routines, her patterns, her vulnerabilities. The other residents of Maple Street viewed Rex with the typical suspicion reserved for large, unaccompanied dogs. Mr. Henderson from 2 houses down had called animal control twice, though the understaffed county service had yet to respond. Sarah Chen, no relation to the Dallas detective who shared her name, left bowls of water on her porch with handwritten signs warning neighbors not to feed the stray, because it would only encourage him to stay. But Rex had already decided to stay, not because of the water bowls or the occasional food scraps, but because Emma Rodriguez needed protection, whether she knew it or not. His keen senses had cataloged every potential danger in her environment. The loose drainage grate on Pine Street that shifted underfoot, the construction site 3 blocks away where children sometimes played among dangerous equipment, the way Emma would dart into the street chasing wind-blown paper boats without checking for traffic. On Thursday afternoon, Rex's vigil was rewarded with validation. Emma's latest paper boat had become lodged in a storm drain opening just beyond her reach. The little girl knelt on the concrete edge, stretching her small arm toward the trapped vessel as the water current tugged at the boat with increasing force. Rex could see what Emma couldn't, the way her weight was shifting forward, the precarious angle that would send her tumbling into the dark channel if she emerged from his hiding place and approached with measured steps. His movement was deliberately calm, non-threatening, designed to avoid startling the child into a dangerous fall. Emma looked up as his shadow fell across the concrete, her eyes widening with surprise rather than fear. "Easy there, big guy," she whispered, unconsciously echoing the tone adults had used with Rex throughout his career. "I'm just trying to get my boat." Rex positioned himself between Emma and the drain opening, then carefully lowered his head and used his muzzle to nudge the girl gently away from the edge. His message was clear: "This is dangerous. Move back." Emma studied his face with the serious concentration of childhood, recognizing something in his eyes that went beyond animal instinct. "You're trying to keep me safe, aren't you?" she asked softly. "You're like a police dog or something." Rex's tail gave the slightest wag at her perceptive words, but he maintained his protective position until Emma stepped back from the drain. Only then did he retreat to his watching post, leaving the child safe but puzzled by their interaction. That evening, as Rex settled into his concrete shelter behind the abandoned gas station, he reflected on the strange turn his life had taken. He was no longer K-9 Officer Rex of the Dallas Police Department, but he was still a protector. His badge was gone, his handler was gone, his official purpose was gone. But the drive to serve, to guard, to place himself between innocence and danger remained as strong as ever. Emma Rodriguez had become his unofficial assignment, his self-appointed responsibility. Tomorrow he would resume his patrol, checking for threats, monitoring her activities, ready to intervene if danger approached. He might be a stray in the eyes of Riverside's residents, but in his own mind, Rex was still on duty. The morning mist clung to Riverside Memorial Park like the remnants of forgotten dreams, creating ethereal shapes among the ancient oak trees that had stood sentinel over the community for nearly a century. Rex had claimed this park as the northern boundary of his patrol route, drawn by its elevation that provided excellent sight lines across the residential neighborhoods below. The injured leg that had ended his official career protested the uphill climb each morning, but tactical advantage was worth the pain. He was conducting his usual perimeter sweep when the man appeared. Miguel Santos moved through the early morning stillness with the careful, measured pace of someone accustomed to evaluating threats and opportunities in equal measure. The sleeve of his left arm was pinned neatly to his shoulder, the fabric precisely folded in the military manner that spoke of pride rather than shame. His right hand carried a steaming cup of coffee, and his dark eyes held the particular alertness that Rex recognized immediately, the look of a warrior who never truly lasts. Massive live oak, his body automatically assuming the motionless stance he'd perfected during countless surveillance operations. But something about this man triggered a different kind of recognition, a deeper understanding that transcended the usual human-animal dynamic. Miguel's posture, his movement patterns, even the way he held his head, spoke of military discipline and battlefield experience. Miguel had noticed Rex immediately, of course. 20 years as a Navy SEAL had honed his peripheral vision to the point where movement in his environment registered like alarm bells. But instead of the casual dismissal most humans showed toward stray dogs, Miguel studied Rex with professional interest. The German Shepherd's positioning was too deliberate to be coincidental, his concealment too sophisticated for an ordinary animal. "Morning, soldier," Miguel said quietly, his voice carrying just far enough to reach Rex without startling him. The greeting was automatic, the acknowledgement one veteran gives to another, regardless of species. Rex's ears pricked forward at the word soldier, a term he'd heard countless times during joint training exercises with military units. But more than the word itself, it was Miguel's tone that captured the dog's attention. There was no fear, no dismissal, no assumption of aggression. This man was evaluating Rex as an equal, recognizing something that the rest of Riverside had missed entirely. Miguel took a slow sip of his coffee and settled onto a nearby park bench, deliberately making himself appear less threatening while maintaining visual contact with the German Shepherd. His movement was economical, purposeful, the kind of tactical positioning that Rex's training allowed him to appreciate and respect. "You've got the look," Miguel continued conversationally, though he kept his voice low and non-confrontational. "The way you move, the way you watch. Military or law enforcement, I'd guess. Probably both." Rex remained frozen, but his tail gave the slightest twitch, an involuntary response to being truly seen for the first time since his abandonment. This man understood what the others missed. Rex wasn't a stray dog who happened to be well-behaved. He was a professional who happened to be unemployed. Miguel's own story was written in the careful way he compensated for his missing arm, the slight favoring of his right leg, where shrapnel had torn through muscle and bone in Afghanistan, the alertness that never completely faded, even in the peaceful setting of a small Texas park. An IED had ended his military career just as decisively as falling concrete had ended Rex's police service, leaving both warriors adrift in a civilian world that deliberately dropped them onto the ground beside the bench. The metallic clatter echoed through the morning stillness, but Miguel made no move to retrieve them. Instead, he sat back and waited, his eyes never leaving Rex. The keys lay there for 30 seconds. A minute, 2 minutes. Rex understood immediately what was being tested: his training, his discipline, his ability to resist the impulse to investigate or interfere. This was a variation of the impulse control exercises he'd mastered years ago, designed to evaluate a working dog's reliability under distraction. Finally, Miguel spoke a single word: "Fetch." Rex moved like liquid lightning, covering the distance to the bench in 3 powerful strides, despite his injured leg. He retrieved the keys with the gentle mouth grip he'd been taught for evidence collection, careful not to leave teeth marks on the metal. Then he sat at perfect attention beside Miguel's bench and waited for the next command. Miguel accepted the keys with the same casual precision he might have shown receiving a mission briefing. "Outstanding," he murmured, and Rex's tail wagged once, a controlled expression of professional pride. "Now the real question is, who are you, and how did you end up playing stray dog in Riverside, Texas?" The next test came naturally. Miguel stood and began walking across the park, his pace steady but not hurried. Rex fell into step beside him automatically, matching his gait to the man's slightly uneven stride, positioning himself on Miguel's left side, where tradition dictated a canine partner should walk. When Miguel stopped, Rex stopped. When he turned, Rex turned. When he sat on another bench, Rex sat at attention beside him. "Jesus Christ," Miguel breathed, the profanity carrying more reverence than blasphemy. "You're not just trained, you're elite. Special operations, federal level or top-tier municipal, and somebody threw you away like garbage." Rex looked up at Miguel's face, reading the anger that was building behind the man's controlled expression. It was the same righteous fury that had driven Miguel's advocacy work with disabled veterans, the rage that came from seeing good soldiers discarded by systems that used them up and moved on without a second thought. "I'm going to figure out who you are," Miguel promised, his voice tight with emotion. "I'm going to find out what happened to you, and I'm going to make sure somebody pays for it." As if summoned by their conversation, Emma Rodriguez appeared on the park's eastern path, her morning walk taking her past the playground where she would soon abandon adult supervision in favor of storm drain adventures. Rex's entire demeanor shifted instantly, his attention focusing on the little girl with laser precision. Miguel followed Rex's gaze and saw what the dog saw, a small child moving toward potential. Looked back at Miguel, as if asking permission to patrol. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. "You've adopted her," Miguel realized. "The little girl. She's your new assignment." Rex's tail wagged once more, confirming what Miguel had already understood. Whatever had brought this elite canine to Riverside, whatever betrayal or abandonment had left him homeless and forgotten, Rex had found a new mission, a new purpose, a new reason to maintain the warrior's vigilance that defined his very soul. Miguel stood and extended his remaining hand toward Rex, palm up in the universal gesture of friendship and respect. "Miguel Santos, Navy SEAL, retired. And you are—" Rex placed his paw in Miguel's hand with the formal precision of a military introduction. And for the first time since Morrison's goodbye, felt the recognition and respect that had once been his daily reality. Two warriors, both wounded, both discarded, both still serving in their own way. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the mist and illuminating a partnership that would prove crucial in the dark days ahead. The yellow house on Maple Street settled into evening silence as Sofia Rodriguez kissed her daughter goodbye and headed into the gathering darkness toward Riverside General Hospital. The porch light cast a warm circle of gold against the encroaching night, but it couldn't reach the shadows where Rex had positioned himself beneath the ancient mesquite tree. that dominated the front yard. From this vantage point, he had clear sightlines to Emma's bedroom window on the second floor, where a nightlight painted dancing horses across sheer curtains. "Be good for Mrs. Chen, mija," Sophia's voice carried across the still air as she climbed into her weathered Honda Civic. "I'll be home before you wake up, I promise." But Rex knew what 7-year-old Emma knew in her heart. Promises about coming home were fragile things, easily broken by emergencies and overtime shifts that stretched through the dawn. He'd seen it in the child's face during their brief encounter at the storm drain. That shadow of abandonment the children wore when they learned too early that the adults in their lives were governed by forces. With a laugh track from some forgotten sitcom, Emma was alone with her fears, just as Rex was alone with his protective instincts that demanded action but had no official sanction. Rex's training warred with something deeper and more primal as he listened to Emma's muffled sobs. 8 years of police work had taught him to maintain emotional distance, to protect without attachment, to serve the mission rather than individual need. But those rules had been written for a world where he wore a badge and answered to human authority. Here in the shadows of Riverside, Texas, abandoned and forgotten, Rex found himself writing new rules with his heart instead of his head. The German Shepherd rose from his concealed position and moved with silent precision to the base of the house. Emma's bedroom window was directly above, maybe 12 feet up the wall, close enough for Rex to hear every whispered word as she talked to her stuffed elephant about missing her mama and being scared of the dark corners where monsters might hide. His keen hearing caught the rustle of sheets as she tossed restlessly, the soft thump of small feet hitting the floor as she padded to the window. Emma's face appeared at the glass, pale and ethereal in the nightlight's glow. She pressed her nose against the cool surface and stared down into the yard, searching for something she couldn't name. Comfort, perhaps, or simply proof that she wasn't completely alone in the vast darkness. Rex remained motionless beneath the mesquite tree, but some instinct made Emma's gaze settle on his position, drawn by the presence of something protective and patient in the shadows. "Are you out there, police dog?" she whispered against the window glass, her breath fogging the surface. "Mama says there's no such thing as guardian angels, but maybe she's wrong." Rex's tail twitched once, the only acknowledgement he would allow himself. His hypervigilant senses catalogued every sound in the neighborhood: the whisper of wind through leaves, the distant hum of traffic on the interstate, the subtle settling of the old house around Emma's small form. His injured leg throbbed from maintaining position, but Rex had endured worse discomfort during surveillance operations that lasted for days. The memories came unbidden as the night deepened around him. Other vigils, other children he'd protected during his years of service. The kidnapped senator's daughter, found traumatized, but alive in that abandoned subway tunnel, who had clung to Rex's fur while they waited for the rescue team. The boy trapped under earthquake debris, who had stayed calm for hours, because Rex's steady presence convinced him that heroes were real, and help was coming. The teenage girl pulled from a house fire, who had trusted Rex to guide her through the smoke when human voices couldn't penetrate her panic. Those children had been assignments, cases to be solved and closed, victories to be catalogued in service records. But Emma Rodriguez was different. She was his choice, his self-appointed mission in a world that no longer recognized his authority or valued his capabilities. The attachment growing in his heart was a violation of everything he'd been taught about professional distance. But Rex found he didn't care about the rules anymore. Around midnight, the thunderheads that had been building on the western horizon began their slow march toward Riverside. The barometric pressure dropped with each passing hour, and Rex could feel the approaching storm in his bones, a skill that had made him invaluable during search and rescue operations. His restlessness increased as the first distant rumble of thunder rolled across the sleeping town, and he rose to pace beneath Emma's window, with the controlled agitation of a sentry who sensed approaching danger. The storm season was coming early this year, the weather reports had warned. Tropical systems were forming in the Gulf with unusual frequency and intensity, driven by water temperatures that broke records with each passing day. Rex didn't understand meteorology, but he understood threat assessment, and every instinct told him that Emma's fascination with storm drains and rushing water was about to become exponentially more dangerous. As dawn approached and Sophia's Honda finally turned back onto Maple Street, Rex retreated to his watching post among the oleander bushes. The little girl's bedroom window remained lit by the dancing horses, but the crying had stopped hours ago. Emma had finally found sleep, perhaps comforted by some unconscious awareness that she was not alone, that something loyal and protective kept watch while darkness held dominion over her world. Rex would be there the next night, and the night after that, not because of orders or duty rosters or service records, but because Emma Rodriguez had become the most important mission of his life. The relationship between Rex and Emma Rodriguez developed like a carefully choreographed dance, each step building trust through small gestures and shared understanding that transcended the barrier between human and animal. 3 weeks after the night vigil began, their connection had evolved into something that resembled partnership, unofficial, unspoken, but undeniably real. Rex learned Emma's schedule with the precision of a protection detail studying a VIP's movements. School pickup at 3:15, when she would emerge from Riverside Elementary with her pink backpack bouncing and her dark hair catching the afternoon sunlight. A brief stop at Chen's Market for a snack, usually animal crackers or a juice box that she would share without being asked. Then the dangerous part, her inevitable migration toward the storm drains, that surveillance with the dedication of a professional bodyguard. Emma's routes were becoming predictable, her preferred play areas mapped in Rex's mind with tactical precision. The storm drain on Maple Street where she sailed paper boats, the concrete channel behind the library where she collected interesting rocks, the main drainage outlet near the park where rushing water created rapids that fascinated her 7-year-old imagination. Each location presented unique hazards that Rex cataloged obsessively. Slippery concrete surfaces made treacherous by algae growth, unstable debris that could shift underfoot and trap small limbs, deep channels where a child could disappear from sight in seconds. Emma approached these dangers with the fearless curiosity of childhood, unaware that her guardian angel possessed the professional expertise to recognize every potential catastrophe. The other residents of Riverside were beginning to notice Rex's constant presence, though their interpretations varied wildly. Mrs. Patterson from the corner house remained convinced he was a threat, calling animal control twice more, with increasingly strident complaints about the dangerous stray that was stalking children. Her calls joined a growing file at the county office, though understaffing meant responses were delayed by weeks rather than days. But others saw different patterns in Rex's behavior. Tom Hendricks, the retired mechanic who lived across from the elementary school, watched Rex position himself along Emma's walking route each afternoon with what looked suspiciously like protective intent. "That dog's not hunting," he told his wife over dinner one evening. He's guarding. I've seen enough military dogs to recognize the difference. Sarah Chen, whose market had become Emma's regular stop, began leaving bowls of fresh water outside her shop. Not to encourage the stray, she told herself, but because any creature willing to maintain such devoted vigilance over a child deserved basic consideration. Rex accepted these offerings with dignified gratitude, drinking deeply before resuming his post. Miguel Santos had begun his own investigation into Rex's background with the methodical determination of a military intelligence operation. His contacts in federal law enforcement were running database searches based on Rex's distinctive markings and estimated age. The microchip scan from the veterinary clinic had yielded only a defunct registration number, but Miguel suspected bureaucratic oversight rather than genuine mystery. Elite K9 units didn't simply lose track of their assets without creating paper trails. Something doesn't add up, Miguel confided to his neighbor. Janet Morrison, no relation to Rex's former handler, despite the shared surname. Dogs like that don't end up as strays. They're too valuable, too well-trained. Somebody either sold him illegally or abandoned him deliberately. Meanwhile, Emma's awareness of her protector grew with each passing day. She had begun talking to Rex during her solitary play sessions, conducting one-sided conversations with the confidence of a child who understood that listening was more important than speaking. "You're different from other dogs," she would say while balancing on the concrete edge of her favorite storm drain. "You watch me like Mama watches patients at the hospital, like you're making sure nothing bad happens." Rex maintained his professional distance, but small gestures of connection crept into their routine. When Emma dropped her animal crackers, Rex would emerge just long enough to nudge the package back within her reach before disappearing again. When she scraped her knee on rough concrete, Rex would appear with a clean tissue that he somehow managed to procure from the nearby garbage bins. These interactions were brief, carefully controlled, designed to provide assistance without triggering the human fear response that Rex had learned to navigate. The breakthrough moment came on a Tuesday afternoon, when Emma's paper boat became trapped beneath a storm grate. She knelt on the concrete edge, reaching desperately for the colorful vessel as it spun in the current just beyond her fingertips. Rex watched from concealment as she stretched further and further, her weight shifting dangerously forward over the dark water. This time, Rex didn't hesitate. He approached with calm authority, positioning himself between Emma and the drain opening with the same protective instinct that had once saved Morrison from falling debris. But instead of simply blocking her access, Rex gently took Emma's wrist in his mouth, using the soft grip trained for evidence handling, and guided her away from the dangerous edge. "You really are taking care of me," Emma whispered, staring into Rex's intelligent brown eyes with wonder rather than fear. "You're like my very own police dog." Rex's tail wagged once, a controlled expression of acknowledgement that he immediately suppressed. Professional distance, he reminded himself. Protect without attachment. Serve the mission, not the individual. But as Emma tentatively reached out to touch his head with small, gentle fingers, Rex found himself leaning slightly into her touch. The gesture was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it marked a fundamental shift in their relationship. Emma was no longer just an assignment to be protected from a distance. She was becoming something more dangerous and more precious. She was becoming family. On the evening news that night, meteorologist Jim Bradley warned viewers about an unusual weather pattern developing in the Gulf of Mexico. "Tropical storm Marcus is strengthening faster than normal for this time of year," he reported, pointing to satellite imagery that showed a swirling mass of clouds approaching the Texas coast. Residents should begin preparing for potential flooding, especially in areas with inadequate drainage infrastructure. Emma wasn't watching the weather report. She was upstairs drawing pictures of her guardian dog with a red crayon cape. But Rex heard every word from his position in the front yard. and his protective instincts sharpened to a razor's edge. Storm season was coming, and his most important mission was about to face its greatest test. The evening storm arrived without the courtesy of gradual build-up, descending on Riverside like a living creature with teeth of lightning and a voice of thunder that shook windows and rattled hearts. Emma Rodriguez sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, surrounded by coloring books and the debris of interrupted childhood, when the first flash turned her small world white as bone. The thunder that followed seemed to originate from inside her chest, a percussion that made her stuffed elephant tumble from her trembling hands. "Mama," she whispered to the empty room, though Sophia was 3 hours into another double shift at the hospital. Mrs. Chen had retired to the living room with her evening soap operas and the bone-deep deafness that came with age, leaving Emma alone with her fears as rain began to hammer the roof like angry fists demanding entrance. Rex heard Emma's cry from his position beneath the mesquite tree, where he had been monitoring the approaching weather system with the hyper-vigilance of a seasoned professional. The atmospheric pressure changes that preceded major storms always triggered his protective instincts, memories of search and rescue operations conducted in similar conditions, flooding back with vivid intensity. But tonight, those memories were overshadowed by immediate concern for the little girl whose terror he could sense even through the walls that separated them. Another lightning flash illuminated Emma's bedroom window, followed by thunder that seemed close enough to touch. Rex saw her small silhouette pressed against the glass, her face pale with the particular fear that storms brought to children, the primal understanding that nature possessed forces capable of destroying everything they held dear. Her lips were moving, and even through the sound of rain and wind, Rex's keen hearing caught fragments of her desperate whispers. "Please don't let the house fall down." Emma prayed to whatever deities might listen to 7-year-old girls. "Please don't let Mama get hurt driving home. Please don't let me be alone." The last word broke something loose in Rex's chest. A barrier he'd maintained between duty and devotion, between protection and love. Emma wasn't alone. Not while he drew breath and possessed the strength to stand guard. The professional distance he'd tried so hard to maintain crumbled like sand before the tide of her need. Rex moved through the storm with practiced efficiency, his injured leg protesting but functional, himself directly beneath Emma's window, close enough to the house that his presence might somehow penetrate the walls and reach the frightened child above. The next thunder crash sent Emma scrambling under her bed, her small form disappearing beneath the checkered comforter like a rabbit seeking sanctuary in its burrow. Rex could hear her muffled sobs, the desperate sounds of a child whose world had suddenly become too large and too dangerous to navigate alone. Every instinct screamed at him to find a way inside, to position himself between Emma and her fears with the physical presence that had comforted countless victims during his years of service. Instead, Rex did something he had never done during 8 years of police work. He tilted his magnificent head toward the storm-dark sky and began to sing. The sound that emerged from his throat was unlike anything the neighborhood had ever heard, part howl, part lullaby, part prayer. It carried the trained vocal control of a working dog combined with something deeper and more primal. A song of comfort that transcended species and spoke directly to the frightened child above. The melody was simple, repetitive, designed to cut through fear and create a pocket of safety in the chaos of the storm. Rex's lullaby had been born during his second year of service, during the aftermath of a school shooting, when a traumatized 6-year-old had refused to leave the supply closet where she'd hidden for 3 hours. No amount of human coaxing had been able to draw her out, but when Rex had sat in the doorway and begun his soft, rhythmic vocalization, the little girl had finally emerged, drawn by the promise of protection that lived in that ancient sound. He had refined the technique over the years, using it to calm kidnapping victims, soothe injured children during medical treatment, and provide comfort to families devastated by loss. It was a skill that existed outside official training protocols, something he'd developed through intuition and tested through experience. Tonight, with lightning turning the world into a battlefield and thunder shaking the foundations of security, Rex offered that gift to Emma Rodriguez. The effect was immediate and profound. Emma's crying slowed, then stopped altogether as the strange, beautiful sound penetrated her fear and wrapped around her like a blanket woven from hope itself. She crawled from beneath the bed and pressed her face against the rain-streaked window, staring down into the storm-lashed yard where impossible music rose to meet her terror. "You're singing to me," she whispered in amazement, her small hands flat against the glass. "You're singing the scared away." Rex continued his lullaby through 3 more lightning strikes, his voice steady and reassuring despite the chaos surrounding him. Rain soaked through his thick coat and turned the ground beneath his feet into treacherous mud, but he maintained had finally found his true calling. This wasn't police work or official duty. This was something far more sacred and infinitely more personal. From his concealed position across the street, Miguel Santos watched the entire scene unfold with growing wonder and absolute certainty. He had approached Emma's neighborhood to check on Rex during the storm, concerned about the dog's welfare in the harsh weather. What he witnessed instead was the most remarkable display of interspecies communication he had ever seen. A retired police dog providing psychological support to a traumatized child with the same professional skill he might once have used to comfort crime victims. "Jesus," Miguel breathed, his voice lost in the storm. "You're not just trained for protection, you're trained for therapy." But Miguel wasn't the only witness to Rex's extraordinary performance. From her own bedroom window 2 houses down, Patricia Hawkins watched with a mixture of fascination and growing alarm. As Riverside's longest-serving city councilwoman, Patricia prided herself on protecting the community from threats both obvious and subtle. And what she saw in Emma Rodriguez's yard looked suspiciously like a large, potentially dangerous dog, displaying predatory behavior toward a vulnerable child. The lightning that had illuminated Rex's noble profile and gentle expression was invisible to Patricia's fearful interpretation. She saw only a powerful animal, positioned beneath a child's window, making loud vocalizations that could be interpreted as aggressive rather than comforting. The beauty of Rex's lullaby was lost in the thunder, transformed by prejudice and misunderstanding into something sinister and threatening. "That settles it," Patricia muttered, already reaching for her phone to document what she was certain was evidence of stalking behavior. "Tomorrow, I'm calling an emergency city council meeting. That dog is a menace, and I'm not waiting for someone to get hurt before we do something about it." As the storm began to move east and the thunder faded to distant grumbling, Rex concluded his lullaby with a soft, sustained note that seemed to carry all the protection and love he possessed. Emma's window remained illuminated, her small form still pressed against the glass, but her terror had transformed into something approaching peace. She had learned tonight that angels sometimes wore fur instead of wings, that guardians sometimes sang instead of spoke, and that love could bridge any distance between species or circumstances. Rex settled beneath the mesquite tree to maintain his vigil, unaware that his greatest act of compassion had been witnessed and misinterpreted by someone with the power to destroy everything he was trying to protect. The storm had passed, but a far more dangerous tempest was building in the corridors of small-town politics, where fear often masqueraded as prudence and prejudice wore the mask of public safety. The Riverside Town Hall hadn't seen this many residents packed into its cramped meeting room since the controversy over the new traffic light 3 years earlier. But tonight, the folding chairs were filled with faces etched with genuine concern, as Emergency Management Coordinator Dave Walsh clicked through satellite imagery that painted an increasingly grim picture. Tropical Storm Marcus, which had been dismissed as a minor weather event just 48 hours earlier, now dominated the projection screen like a malevolent eye staring directly at the Texas coast. "Ladies and gentlemen, we need to be clear about what we're facing," Walsh announced, his usually calm demeanor showing cracks of stress. "Marcus has intensified to near hurricane strength, faster than any storm on record. The National Weather Service is now predicting sustained winds of 75 miles per hour and rainfall totals that could exceed 12 inches in a 6-hour period." Mayor Jennifer Wilson shifted uncomfortably in her seat at the head of the room, her political instincts warring with the growing certainty that Riverside was woefully unprepared for what was coming. The town's emergency response budget had been slashed 2 years running, victim of the same fiscal constraints that left potholes unfilled and streetlights dark for weeks after burning out. Now, those penny-wise decisions threatened to exact a price measured in lives rather than dollars. "Our primary concern is flooding," Walsh continued, pointing to a map that showed Riverside's vulnerability with clinical precision. The storm drain system was designed in 1962 for a population of 2,000 residents and a 10-year storm event. We now have over 8,000 residents, and Marcus is shaping up to be a 100-year storm. Patricia Hawkins raised her meticulously manicured hand from the third row, her expression carrying the particular determination of someone who had discovered a new cause to champion. "Before we discuss evacuation procedures, I think we need to address another public safety issue that's been ignored for too long." Mayor Wilson suppressed a sigh, recognizing the tone that preceded Patricia's more elaborate crusades. "What issue would that be, Councilwoman?" "Dangerous animals roaming our neighborhoods during emergency conditions," Patricia declared, her voice carrying to every corner of the crowded room. "We have a large, aggressive stray dog that's been stalking children for weeks. During the last storm, I personally witnessed this animal engaging in threatening behavior outside a residence where a young girl lives alone at night." Miguel Santos, who had positioned himself near the back exit for reasons that had nothing to do with emergency planning, felt his jaw clench involuntarily. From his vantage point, he could see several residents nodding in agreement with Patricia's voice carrying the quiet authority of military experience. "I've observed the animal in question, and his behavior appears protective rather than aggressive. During emergency conditions, having additional security presence might actually be beneficial." Patricia's eyes narrowed as she turned to face the speaker, her political antenna immediately detecting opposition. "Mr. Santos, isn't it? You're relatively new to our community, so you might not understand the full scope of the problem. This isn't some friendly neighborhood pet. It's a large, unregistered animal with no collar, no tags, and no owner taking responsibility for its actions." "Perhaps," Miguel replied carefully, "but eliminating potential assets during an emergency might be premature. Some dogs have training that could be valuable for search and rescue operations. The room buzzed with murmurs as residents processed this unexpected perspective. Tom Hendricks, the retired mechanic who had been watching Rex's protective behavior for weeks, cleared his throat from near the front. "I've been seeing that dog around the Rodriguez girl almost daily. Doesn't look like stalking to me. Looks like he's keeping an eye on her." Walsh raised his hands for quiet, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the discussion had taken. "Folks, we can address animal control issues after the storm passes. Right now, we need to focus on evacuation procedures and emergency sheltering." But Patricia wasn't finished. "The storm is exactly why this matters," she pressed. "During chaotic conditions, unpredictable animals become exponentially more dangerous. What happens when this dog gets frightened by thunder and lightning? What happens when a child approaches it during flooding conditions?" Miguel felt the political tide turning against Rex and knew he had to retreat before his advocacy became counterproductive. "Of course, public safety is paramount," he conceded. "I simply suggest we gather more information before making irreversible decisions." As Walsh resumed his presentation on evacuation routes and emergency shelters, Miguel's mind was already racing through contingencies. Patricia Hawkins had just painted a target on Rex's back, using the approaching storm as justification for action that could prove fatal for the dog who had become his unlikely brother-in-arms. Meanwhile, 2 miles away in the fading daylight, Emma Rodriguez crouched beside her favorite storm drain, with a collection of paper boats that would never survive the deluge heading toward Riverside. She had heard the weather warnings on television, seen the serious expressions on adult faces, but 7-year-old logic processed such information differently. Storms meant exciting, rushing water, perfect conditions for boat races and adventures that were impossible during boring, sunny days. Rex watched from his concealed position behind the hardware store, every instinct screaming warnings that had nothing to do with Emma's immediate safety. The atmospheric pressure was dropping faster than he'd ever experienced, triggering responses in his nervous system that had been honed by years of tracking weather patterns during search operations. This wasn't going to be an ordinary storm. This was going to be a catastrophe that would test every skill he possessed and challenge the very foundations of the community that had reluctantly become his home. The barometric changes affected Rex like a drug, heightening his senses while simultaneously making him restless with anticipatory energy. He could smell the approaching rain hours before the first clouds appeared, could feel the electrical tension building in the atmosphere like a living thing preparing to strike. His injured leg ached with the particular pain that preceded major weather systems. A meteorological forecast written in damaged nerves and old scar tissue. As the emergency meeting concluded and residents filed out of the town hall with expressions of barely controlled anxiety, Rex began the most important reconnaissance mission of his career. Tomorrow would bring winds that could turn debris into projectiles, rain that could transform streets into rivers, and flooding that could trap Emma Rodriguez in the concrete channels she loved to explore. Every drainage outlet, every storm grate, every potential hazard in his territory needed to be catalogued and assessed before Marcus arrived. The storm was coming, and with it, a test that would determine whether Rex's unofficial adoption of Riverside would end in heroism or tragedy. The blue glow of Miguel Santos's computer screen painted harsh shadows across his weathered features as he clicked through the final database search of a night that had stretched into the early morning hours. Empty coffee cups littered his desk like monuments to obsession, and the stack of printouts beside his keyboard represented 3 weeks of methodical investigation into the identity of Riverside's most controversial resident. What Miguel had discovered in the past 6 hours would have impressed his former intelligence colleagues and enraged anyone with a functioning sense of justice. K9 Rex, badge number K97, Dallas Police Department, 8 years of exemplary service, 53 successful drug interdictions, 12 missing person recoveries, 4 federal commendations, and a Silver Star for valor that few humans ever earned. The service record read like a monument to dedication and courage, each entry representing lives saved and criminals apprehended through the partnership between an elite German Shepherd and his handler, Captain James Morrison. But it was the final entries in Rex's file that made Miguel's blood pressure spike toward dangerous levels. Medical retirement due to injury sustained in line of duty. Transfer to Lone Star Transport Services for delivery to Happy Valley Canine Sanctuary, reached Tennessee. Miguel's follow-up calls to Happy Valley had confirmed what he'd already suspected. No German Shepherd matching Rex's description had ever arrived at their facility. The transport company's records showed delivery completion, but when pressed for details, their customer service representative had grown evasive and eventually hung up. A classic bureaucratic shell game designed to make problems disappear through paperwork rather than solutions. "Bastards," Miguel muttered, printing the service record with hands that trembled slightly from caffeine and righteous fury. They dumped a decorated war hero like garbage and covered it up with forged documents. His military contacts had been invaluable in penetrating the layers of bureaucratic protection that typically shielded such operations from scrutiny. Master Sergeant Janet Torres, now working private security in Houston, had accessed databases that weren't supposed to exist. Lieutenant Colonel Bob Mitchell, retired from Army intelligence, had provided contact information for federal investigators who specialized in cases of systemic fraud within government-contractor relationships. The picture that emerged was both depressingly familiar and uniquely horrific. Lone Star Transport Services had been collecting fees for retired canine deliveries while systematically abandoning the animals in rural locations across 3 states. The company's owners pocketed the transportation fees, filed fraudulent completion reports, and moved on to the next contract. Rex was victim number 17 that Miguel had been able to document, and the investigation was far from complete. Miguel leaned back in his desk chair and rubbed his eyes, trying to process the magnitude of what he'd uncovered. This wasn't just animal abuse. It was a betrayal of the social contract that bound society to its protectors. Dogs like Rex gave everything in service to human communities, asking only for basic care and respect in return. To abandon them after injury or retirement wasn't just cruel, it was a violation of honor that struck at the heart of everything Miguel believed about duty and loyalty. The weather report playing softly on his television provided grim counterpoint to his research. Tropical storm Marcus had strengthened again overnight, now carrying sustained winds of 85 miles per hour with gusts exceeding 100. The storm's eye was projected to make landfall less than 50 miles from Riverside in approximately 18 hours, bringing with it the kind of flooding that could turn routine rescue operations into life-or-death struggles. Miguel's phone buzzed with a text message from his contact at the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. The federal government was very interested in Lone Star Transport Services, particularly their pattern of defrauding taxpayers while endangering retired service animals. An investigation was already immediate needs of abandoned dogs scattered across rural Texas. "Too little, too late," Miguel said to his MP office, thinking of Rex maintaining his solitary vigil over Enma Rodriguez, while bureaucrats shuffled papers and prosecutors built cases. Justice would eventually be served, but that wouldn't help if Rex was euthanized as a dangerous stray before his true identity could be established. Meanwhile, 2 miles away, in the residential streets of Riverside, Rex conducted his own investigation with the methodical thoroughness of a professional preparing for combat. His nightly security patrol had expanded to include every storm drain, every drainage outlet, every potential flood hazard within a 6-block radius of Emma's house. The approaching storm had triggered protocols buried deep in his training, emergency preparedness procedures that went far beyond routine patrol work. Rex's enhanced senses detected atmospheric changes that wouldn't register on human instruments for hours yet. The wind patterns were shifting, carrying scents of distant rain and electrical activity that made his fur stand on end. His injured leg throbbed with each pressure fluctuation, turning old trauma into a living barometer that predicted danger with uncomfortable accuracy. The German Shepherd paused beside the main drainage channel that ran behind the library, studying the concrete walls with the eye of someone who understood structural engineering through hard-won experience. During normal conditions, this channel carried perhaps 6 inches of runoff from residential streets and parking lots. But tomorrow, when Marcus arrived with its cargo of torrential rain and hurricane-force winds, this concrete canal would become a raging torrent, capable of sweeping away anything or anyone caught in its path. Rex marked the location in his mental database and continued his reconnaissance, driven by instincts that had been honed during years of disaster response operations. He had worked Hurricane Rita in 2005, searching flooded neighborhoods for survivors who hadn't evacuated in time. He had tracked missing persons through the aftermath of the Moore tornado in 2013, finding families trapped in debris fields where human searchers couldn't penetrate. He knew exactly what storm-driven flooding could do to small communities with inadequate infrastructure. Emma Rodriguez's favorite playground was about to become a death trap, and Rex was the only one who fully understood the scope of the day. Remained was to wait for the storm to begin, and to pray that 8 years of training and a lifetime of dedication would be enough to save the child who had taught an abandoned hero that love was stronger than duty and hope more powerful than despair. The morning of Marcus arrived with the peculiar stillness that preceded major storms, as if nature itself was holding its breath before unleashing chaos upon the Texas coast. Riverside's Main Street buzzed with the controlled panic of last-minute preparations as business owners hammered plywood over windows, and residents made final runs to the grocery store for supplies that would sustain them through the dark hours ahead. The sky overhead bore the sickly yellow-green tinge that locals recognized as nature's warning. Seek shelter now, or face the consequences. Sofia Rodriguez received the call at 6:47 a.m. while she was braiding Emma's hair for what she hoped would be a normal school day. The voice on the phone belonged to Dr. Patterson, Riverside General's chief of emergency medicine, and his message was both expected and dreaded. "Sophia, I need you here by noon." We're implementing disaster protocols, and your trauma experience makes you essential personnel. This is mandatory overtime, federal emergency declaration." Emma watched her mother's face transform as the conversation continued, seeing the familiar expression that meant duty would once again triumph over family time. Sophia's dedication to her profession was both noble and heartbreaking, saving lives while leaving her daughter in the care of neighbors who meant well but could never truly understand the fierce intelligence and curious nature that made Emma Rodriguez both remarkable and vulnerable. "Mrs. Chen will take good care of you, mija," Sophia said, kneeling to meet her daughter's eyes, with the forced confidence that adults used when making promises they weren't certain they could keep. "The storm will pass by tonight, and I'll be home tomorrow morning. I need you to promise me you'll stay inside, away from the storm drains. Promise me, Emma." Emma nodded with the solemn sincerity of childhood, a promise she fully intended to keep until circumstances made it impossible to honor. 7-year-old logic operated on different principles than adult reasoning, viewing promises as guidelines rather than absolute commandments, especially when adventure called from the concrete channels that would soon carry the rushing water she found so fascinating. Rex observed these preparations from his position beneath the mesquite tree, his heightened senses processing information that painted an increasingly dire picture of approaching catastrophe. The barometric pressure had dropped to levels that made his ears ache and his injured leg throb with each heartbeat. The wind carried scents of distant rain mixed with the ozone smell that preceded electrical storms, while his first instinct screamed that Emma needed to be moved to higher ground, away from the storm drain system that would soon become a network of deadly torrents. But Rex possessed no authority to enforce such wisdom, no voice to communicate the urgency that consumed his every thought. He could only watch and wait and pray that his protective presence would be enough when the crisis finally arrived. By mid-afternoon, Riverside had taken on the appearance of a town under siege. Sandbags lined the entrances to low-lying businesses, and the few residents still visible on the streets moved with the hurried efficiency of people who understood they were racing against time. The first outer bands of Marcus were already visible on the horizon, towering cumulonimbus clouds that rose like mountains in the southern sky. Emma Rodriguez, meanwhile, had grown increasingly restless under Mrs. Chen's well-meaning but inadequate supervision. The elderly woman had settled into her afternoon soap opera routine, her attention absorbed by the melodramatic problems of television characters, while the real world prepared for genuine disaster outside her living room window. When Emma announced she was going to play in the backyard, Mrs. Chen waved absent agreement without looking away from her program. But Emma's destination wasn't the backyard. It was the storm drain system that called to her with the irresistible appeal of rushing water and floating adventures. The concrete channels were already carrying more flow than usual, fed by early rain bands that had swept through the area an hour earlier. To Emma's 7-year-old eyes, the increased current looked like the perfect opportunity for boat races that would be impossible under normal conditions. Rex saw her leave Mrs. Chen's house through the back door, her pink backpack bouncing as she headed directly toward the drainage area behind the library. His protective instincts went into overdrive as he tracked her movement, reading the dangerous enthusiasm in her body language that spoke of a child prepared to take risks that adults would recognize as potentially fatal. The German Shepherd abandoned his concealed position and began trailing Emma with the stealth techniques that had made him legendary during surveillance operations. His injured leg protested the increased pace, but adrenaline and desperation provided the strength he needed to maintain visual contact while remaining undetected by his primary responsibility. Emma approached the main drainage channel with the confidence of familiarity, unaware that the concrete walls she knew so well were already slippery with condensation and algae growth that would make any slip potentially catastrophic. She knelt at the edge and began unpacking her collection of paper boats, each one carefully crafted and decorated with markers that would dissolve within minutes of contact with the rushing water. Rex positioned himself 20 yards downstream, calculating angles and distances with the precision of someone who understood that rescue operations required split-second timing and perfect positioning. The current was stronger than Emma realized, moving fast enough to carry a small child beyond help if she fell into the channel. His muscles tensed in preparation for action as he watched her lean further and further over the concrete edge in pursuit of a boat that had escaped her grasp. The crisis arrived without dramatic buildup. Emma stretched too far, her small hands slipped on the wet concrete, and momentum carried her forward toward the dark water below. Rex exploded into motion, covering the distance between them in powerful strides that ignored the protests of his injured leg. He reached Emma just as she lost her balance completely, his strong jaws closing gently but firmly on the back of her jacket as gravity tried to claim another victim. The rescue was textbook perfect. Rex's grip distributed across the jacket's fabric to avoid injury, his powerful neck muscles providing the leverage needed to pull Emma back from the edge, his positioning such that he served as an anchor point between the child and the flowing water below. Within seconds, Emma was sitting safely on solid ground, her eyes wide with shock and growing understanding of how close she had come to disaster. "You saved me," she whispered, staring into Rex's intelligent brown eyes with wonder and gratitude. "You really are my guardian angel." But their moment of connection was shattered by an outraged voice that carried across the drainage area like a battle cry. Patricia Hawkins had witnessed the entire incident from her afternoon walk, and her interpretation of events bore no resemblance to the reality of heroic rescue that had just unfolded. "Get away from that child!" Patricia screamed, rushing toward them with her cell phone already recording video. "Someone help! The dog is attacking Emma Rodriguez!" Rex froze in confusion as Patricia's voice transformed his act of protection into something sinister and threatening. Emma tried to explain, her young voice lost in the wind that was beginning to howl as Marcus approached the coast. Within minutes, Patricia's distorted version of events would be transmitted to every city council member and emergency official in Riverside, painting Rex as a dangerous predator who had finally revealed his true nature during the chaos of storm preparation. As the first heavy raindrops began to fall and the wind reached levels that made standing difficult, Rex realized that his greatest fear was coming true. The storm that threatened Emma's physical safety was nothing compared to the human tempest that would soon threaten his very existence. World. Tropical Storm Marcus hit Riverside like an angry god, turning the quiet Texas town into a battlefield of wind and water. By dawn, streets were rivers, sidewalks rapids sweeping away furniture, cars, and anything in their path. The wind screamed like human voices, rattling windows and doors, desperate to get inside. Rex sheltered under the rusted overhang of an abandoned gas station, his coat warding off some of the sideways rain that found every gap. Comfort didn't matter. His eyes stayed locked on the Rodriguez house 6 blocks away, where 7-year-old Emma should have been with Mrs. Chen, while her mother, Dr. Sofia Rodriguez, worked at the hospital. Through the rain, his injured leg throbbed with every pressure shift, a living barometer warning that Marcus was still strengthening. Riverside's emergency services were buckling. Flooding trapped the volunteer fire trucks. Half the police patrols were out of radio contact. The last working ambulance sat stranded at the hospital. Inside the Rodriguez home, Mrs. Chen woke from a nap to find Emma gone. Panic surged as she searched every room. With shaking hands, she left unanswered voicemails on Sofia's overloaded cell network. Emma, meanwhile, stood in the basement, staring at her pink toy boat, floating in 3 inches of water. It was her prized possession, and she was determined to save it. In the storm, she slipped outside toward the storm drains. Rex spotted her small form, struggling through the wind toward deadly floodwaters. Pain seared his injured leg, but training and instinct overrode everything. Emma was in lethal danger. The drainage channel had become a roaring concrete canyon, churning with debris, tree limbs, car parts, moving fast enough to kill on impact. Slippery, algae-coated walls offered no escape. Emma knelt at the edge, reaching for the drifting boat. She leaned farther, lost her balance. Rex launched himself forward, a blur of muscle and will, intercepting her mid-fall as both plunged into the torrent. The current seized Emma like a rag doll. The pink boat vanished instantly. 3 seconds later, Rex hit the water, angling with practiced precision. Swift water training told him to work with the current, not against it, calculating the intercept point. Pain ripped through his hind leg, but he pressed on. Emma flailed, her movements slowing in the icy water. Hypothermia was minutes away. Rex cut across her path and clamped his jaws gently onto the back of her with him. They tumbled inside, finding momentary calm. Rex lifted Emma onto his back to keep her above the rising water, sharing his warmth while calculating their odds. They had maybe 20 minutes before the space was submerged. Emma's lips were blue. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I want my mama." Something broke in Rex's chest. This wasn't just another rescue. This was his child. He tilted his head and began the soft, low howl that had soothed her weeks earlier during a thunderstorm. This was no trained signal. It was a lullaby. Emma's eyes opened. "You're singing to me again," she murmured, smiling faintly despite her fear. The water rose another 6 inches. Rex's legs cramped, pain from his injury nearly blinding. But Emma's shivering returned, a good sign. She studied him with steady eyes. "Are we going to die down here?" she asked. Rex pressed his muzzle to her cheek. Whatever happened, she wouldn't face it alone. Above them, Miguel Santos, former Navy SEAL, led a desperate search. He'd gathered every boat, canoe, and kayak into an improvised flotilla, sweeping flooded streets while shouting Emma's name. "She's in the drainage system," Miguel yelled over the storm. Rex would have followed. "Find the entry point. We can guess where they are." Mrs. Chen had told him about Emma's fascination with the drains behind the library. Miguel plotted likely routes, knowing flooding made most outlets unreachable and currents deadly for searchers. At the hospital, Sophia fought to save other children while her own was missing. Her hands stitched wounds, but her mind was 6 miles away in the dark under Riverside. In the chamber, water lapped inches from the ceiling. Soon, they'd have to choose. Drown here or gamble on the current. Emma pressed her face into Rex's wet fur. "I love you, police dog. You're the best friend I ever had." Warmth slid down Rex's muzzle that wasn't floodwater. In the storm's darkness, a battered hero and a little girl clung to each other, their bond unbroken by species or circumstance. Hope burning stubbornly against the rising tide. The drainage outlet behind the Riverside Public Library had become a roaring waterfall. Marcus's fury channeled into a torrent that might have been beautiful under gentler skies. Miguel Santos's rescue crew battled the current in Tom Hendricks's battered fishing boat, searching the churning outflow. "There," Miguel shouted, pointing to a shape fighting against the current. Rex exploded from the storm drain like something forged in the chaos, his paws sliding on slick concrete as he carried Emma Rodriguez in his jaws, not by flesh, but by her jacket, solid ground, and laid Emma down before collapsing beside her. Hypothermia had gripped them both, yet he stayed close, guarding her until help arrived. But the first responders saw blood before they saw truth. "Jesus Christ," Fire Chief Danny Morrison breathed. "The dogs attacked her." Deputy Kate Williams drew her weapon, training it on Rex. "Nobody move. Child attack situation. Requesting animal control backup." Morrison worked to stabilize Emma, never noticing the absence of bite wounds. Rex, understanding enough to grasp their fear, had no strength left to defend himself. Then Patricia Hawkins arrived, cell phone raised like a banner. "I told you this would happen," she declared, her voice carrying over the water. "That animal's been stalking children for weeks. Now look." Miguel saw what they didn't. Rex's posture was protective, not predatory. "Look at her jacket," he shouted. "No punctures. This was a rescue." But Patricia's words had already taken root. When Animal Control Officer Janet Ross arrived, Rex was classified a threat. The tranquilizer dart hit his shoulder. He crawled toward Emma, keeping her in sight until darkness closed in. Rex woke in a concrete kennel that smelled of fear and disinfectant. Even sedated, he carried himself with the composed dignity of a trained canine. Ross recognized he wasn't acting aggressive, but policy was policy, and child endangerment meant protocol. "Emergency hearing tomorrow," she told her supervisor. "Patricia's pushing for immediate euthanization, says she has video and witnesses." Her video, blood on Rex's muzzle, Emma unconscious, spread through the Riverside Gazette and local social media within hours. "Dangerous dog attacks local child during flood," screamed the headline. Commenters condemned him without seeking facts. But Miguel arrived at the facility with proof. Rex's identity as K9 Rex, badge K97, Dallas PD, 8 years service, 3 medals of valor, 53 successful operations. He was abandoned by a fraudulent transport company, Miguel told Ross. She acknowledged the resemblance, but stuck to policy. Across town, Dr. Sofia Rodriguez, Emma's mother and a respected trauma nurse, examined her daughter. Hypothermia, exhaustion, but no evidence of an animal attack. "Misha," she asked gently, "do you remember what happened?" Emma's face lit with weak but certain gratitude. "The police dog saved me. He held me up so I wouldn't drown. He sang to me so I wouldn't be scared." Sophia understood now why Emma had called him her guardian angel dog. "We have to help him, Mama," Emma insisted. "They think he hurt me." But transport records detailed the injury that ended his career and the betrayal that followed. 48 hours, Miguel muttered. 48 hours to save a hero. He gathered a small team. Tom Hendricks organized witness statements. Sarah Chen collected video contradicting Patrice's stalking claims. Captain Morrison, Rex's original handler, is driving down tonight to testify, Miguel announced. Sophia brought Emma's medical records, proof there were no injuries from a dog. Emma herself became Rex's fiercest advocate. "He never let go," she told Miguel, "even when the water tried to take us both." But Patricia had her own curated witnesses, neighbors misreading watchfulness as aggression, and a willing media. Channel 7 ran her as an expert, repeating the phrase, "predatory behavior," until it stuck. "The evidence speaks for itself," she told viewers. "We can't let sentiment override safety." Miguel knew public opinion was shifting fast, fear outpacing fact. Captain James Morrison arrived near midnight, road-worn but resolute. He carried commendations, photos, and the memories of 8 years with Rex. "He saved my life," Morrison said. "Pushed me clear when that warehouse roof collapsed. Probably saved a dozen others." At the animal control facility, their reunion was limited to a few minutes through the kennel bars. Rex's tail thumped weakly. Morrison pressed his hand to the bars. "I thought you were safe, boy. I never imagined they'd dump you like this." Rex nuzzled him in the old pre-operation gesture, forgiveness in its purest form. As dawn neared, Miguel's team finalized their defense. Documented service record, medical proof, expert witnesses, and the truth itself. But they knew tomorrow's hearing wasn't just about evidence. It was about whether Riverside could see the difference between a monster and a guardian angel. In his kennel, Rex waited with the patient dignity of a soldier, his faith in human justice unbroken. He had saved the child. Whether anyone would save him was now in their hands. The Riverside Town Hall had never felt so charged. Every seat and inch of standing space claimed by residents split between fear and compassion. What began as an emergency animal control hearing had become a referendum on the soul of the town, and on the fate of one German shepherd named Rex. Mayor Jennifer Wilson opened the proceedings with a gavel strike that echoed like a gunshot. Patricia Hawkins, leading the push for Rex's destruction, presented a tightly organized case, bolstered by supporters who saw themselves as protectors of public safety. She described Rex as an unregistered, aggressive animal who had terrorized the neighborhood and nearly killed 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez during the previous day's storm. Her evidence, edited cell phone clips, selective witness statements, twisted Rex's professional vigilance into predatory behavior. "This animal has been hunting," she declared. Fear rippled through the room, parents clutching children closer. When Rex was led in, muzzle in place, he sat with perfect attention, scanning the crowd with the alertness of the decorated police canine he was. Miguel Santos, a former naval officer, sat near the back, ready to counter Patricia's narrative with facts. At his table sat Emma, small hands folded, eyes locked on the dog who had saved her. "I'm scared, Mama," she whispered to her mother, Dr. Sofia Rodriguez. "They're wrong. He would never hurt anybody." Miguel rose to speak. Calm, authoritative, he began. "The dog you've been told to fear is a decorated police officer." Photos flashed on screen. Rex in his Dallas PD K9 vest, standing beside Captain James Morrison. Miguel detailed Rex's 8 years of service. Drug busts, rescues, federal commendations, even saving Morrison's life during a warehouse collapse. Evidence shifted the atmosphere. Videos showed Rex performing for school children, tracking suspects, finding missing persons. Morrison's video testimony was blunt. "Rex saved my life. He's a hero." Veterinarian Dr. Elizabeth Harper explained the blood on his muzzle came from fabric cutting his gums during a rescue, not from biting. Then Emma took the microphone. In her small, unwavering voice, she described being trapped in the storm drain, Rex holding her up so she wouldn't drown.
"He's not dangerous. He's my guardian angel."
Sophia followed with medical evidence. No bite wounds, no injuries consistent with an attack. Supporters began to speak. Mechanic Tom Hendricks said he'd watched Rex for weeks. Only protection, guarding that little girl like his own. Shop owner Sarah Chen agreed. That's not predatory behavior, that's love. Patricia tried to push back, calling the defense emotional manipulation, but her case was unraveling. After a brief deliberation, Mayor Wilson returned with the verdict. No evidence of dangerous behavior and recognition of Rex's actions as heroic. He would be released into Sophia's custody. Adoption papers already filed. Relief erupted. Children clapped. Adults wiped tears. Sophia and Emma approached Rex. When his muzzle was removed, he licked Emma's face with gentle affection. "Welcome to the family, Rex," Sophia whispered. Rex walked out between mother and daughter, no longer a prisoner, but a loved family member. Riverside had nearly destroyed a hero, but in saving him, they'd found something just as valuable: the courage to see truth over fear. The Yellow House Coffee welcomed him now as family, not as territory to be guarded from afar. Emma bounced beside him, her hand resting proudly on his broad back as she gave a grand tour. "This is our couch where we watch movies, and this is the kitchen where Mama makes the best pancakes in Texas. And this is your food bowl. I picked it out special." The house spoke of love lived in modest means, mismatched furniture, chosen for comfort, photographs covering every surface, and the gentle chaos of a home where laughter outweighed order. Rex found no threats here, only the peace of being wanted. Sophia watched with tears she didn't hide. As a doctor, she'd noted the limp in his right hind leg, the scars from years in service, and the way he positioned himself to protect his injury without dropping his guard. "He's been hurt," Emma said softly. "But he's safe now, right, Mama?" "He's safe," Sophia assured her. "He'll always be safe with us." At sunset, Miguel Santos arrived with a small wooden box, Rex's service medals, rescued from an evidence locker. Every officer earns these through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Rex's record would make human heroes jealous. Emma lifted the silver star with awe. "It's like he's a real soldier." "He is," Miguel said. Rex's ears pricked as he saw the medals. Taking the silver star gently in his mouth, he carried it upstairs to Emma's room and placed it under her pillow. An ancient warrior's gesture of safeguarding what mattered most. "He's promising to keep me safe forever," Emma whispered. That night, Rex settled beside her bed with a sigh of contentment. For the first time since the warehouse collapse that ended his police career, he slept deeply, not the wary doze of a stray, but the healing rest of one who no longer fought alone. In the weeks that followed, Riverside's view of Rex transformed. Those who once crossed the street to avoid him now greeted him with nods and waves. His morning walks with Emma became small-town events. Children asked to pet the real police dog who had saved her life. Tom Hendricks, the mechanic, became his loudest advocate. That dog's got more integrity in his tail than most politicians have in their whole bodies. We almost made the worst mistake in this town's history. Riverside Elementary made him an unofficial mascot. Emma beamed as she told classmates, "Rex used to catch bad guys in Dallas, but now he takes care of me, which is even more important."
"Slow," Miguel told him. "But it moves. You're already vindicated." Children gathered around Rex at the playground, listening as Emma retold the storm drain rescue. The night terrors that once plagued her vanished under his watchful eye. "He's healing her faster than any therapist could," Sophia confided to Miguel, "and she's healing him too." Remarkably, Rex's presence even healed old divisions in town. Formerly distant neighbors now shared pride in him. The local paper ran features on his service, drawing visitors from nearby towns. One evening at the community center, a new idea took shape. Talking with Sophia, Miguel envisioned Heroes Healing Heroes, a program pairing Rex with disabled veterans and children facing challenges beyond the reach of traditional therapy. "Rex understands trauma," Miguel told community leaders. "He doesn't judge or quit. He offers presence and acceptance." In the first demonstration, 8-year-old Tommy Martinez, a boy with autism, sat across from Rex in silence. After 20 minutes, Tommy reached out, whispering, "Soft dog, good dog." It was his first voluntary speech in months. Rex wagged once, letting the boy explore his fur without moving. Child psychologist Dr. Jennifer Walsh, overseeing the program, was stunned. "I've never seen him connect this fast." Next came Miguel himself. Rex leaned gently against his side, easing both pain and guilt. "He knows what it's like to be discarded by the system you served," Miguel said. "Some wounds heal through presence, not words." The city council approved the program unanimously, funding equipment and staff. Local businesses donated more, and the bank created a trust for long-term support. Emma was named Rex's training assistant, ensuring his new mission never pulled him from her side. Her joy became part of the therapy itself. "Rex saves people," she'd tell newcomers. "He saved me from drowning. Now he's going to save you from being sad." The first official session would bring 6 veterans and 4 children. Under professional guidance, but with freedom to follow his instincts, Rex would adapt to each case, something his police training had prepared him for. As the last planning meeting ended, Rex lay at Emma's feet, relaxed in a way he never had before. He had found a home, a family, and a mission that mattered, not chasing criminals, but healing broken hearts, one at a time. The abandoned warrior was now a therapy dog. The hero who once guarded an entire city now protected her convoy outside Fallujah 18 months earlier, stilled as she buried them in his thick coat. "He knows," she whispered, tremors fading. "He knows what it's like to come home broken." Dr. Patricia Coleman, the VA's chief therapist, had never seen such instant change. Maria, unresponsive to months of therapy and resistant to touch, had trusted Rex within minutes. "Rex adjusts
to each veteran's trauma, Dr. Coleman told program coordinator Miguel Santos. It's like he reads their service records through empathy alone. Miguel understood. Rex had eased his own phantom pain when morphine couldn't. Veterans recognize authenticity, he said, and Rex is as authentic as they come. In 6 months, Heroes Healing Heroes had grown beyond expectations. Veterans drove from hours away for sessions with the retired police dog, whose recovery was legend in military circles. Corporal James Mitchell, haunted by Afghanistan, found hope again through Rex's active engagement. He reminded me why I served, James told a group. If he can find purpose after betrayal, maybe I can too. Female veterans, many survivors of military sexual trauma, responded to Rex's patient, non-intrusive presence. Staff Sergeant Linda Patterson, once unable to trust, learned that strength could exist without threat. Skeptical staff became advocates. Nurses saw Rex detect anxiety before attacks peaked and offer comfort no medication could match. In 25 years, I've never seen trauma addressed like this, Dr. Coleman said. Rex's answer to, "Does anyone understand?" is always yes. The program drew national interest, though Miguel knew Rex's combination of elite training, trauma, and temperament was unique. What could be replicated was the truth. Sometimes, only warriors could help other warriors. That afternoon, as the session ended, Dr. Coleman watched Rex leave with professional respect. This was a healer in his prime. At Riverside Elementary, 500 children sat spellbound as Rex demonstrated the skills that made him a Dallas PD legend. Emma Rodriguez, 9 years old and glowing in her role as official assistant, explained commands with practiced confidence. "This is a downstay," she told them. "He won't move until I give the magic word." Rex held his position despite the hum of hundreds of restless kids. His scent work and tracking drew cheers. He found a lost pencil, a teacher's keys, and a custodian's name tag hidden in the auditorium. "He's like a superhero," one boy whispered. Guidance counselor Patricia Williams saw deeper lessons: perseverance, service, and not judging by appearances. The children who once feared Rex now lined up to help. Emma told them how adults had once misunderstood him, linking weird. Emma had Rex greet her. He sat, offered his paw, and wagged warmly. "Rex likes everyone with a kind heart," Emma said. Teachers noticed changes. Disruptive students sat quietly during presentations, and bullying dropped by 40%. Principals from other districts invited Rex to visit, and Emma traveled with him to spread his message. For Rex, school visits were another mission, still serving and protecting, but now building character and inspiring hope. 5 years changed them both. Emma, now 12, remained Rex's partner, the silver star still under her pillow each night. Heroes had served over 300 veterans, earning Rex a dedicated therapeutic wing at the VA, adorned with photos and thank you letters. One of the most visible success stories was Sergeant First Class David Thompson. "Rex saved my life," he said at the program's 3rd anniversary, "not by a dramatic rescue, but by showing survival is just the beginning of service." Rex's school visits had reached 15,000 children statewide, improving school climates and inspiring careers in public service. Age had silvered his muzzle and slowed his pace. Arthritis in his injured leg required medication. Dr. Rodriguez adjusted his schedule, ensuring work still brought joy without strain. Rex was no longer chasing criminals or braving disasters. His battlefield now was quiet rooms, classrooms, and playgrounds, places where his presence built trust, eased fear, and planted hope. The mission had changed, but the dedication had not. He was still making the world safer, one soul at a time. Emma's own growth had been shaped by her partnership with Rex in ways that extended far beyond the confidence that came from having a personal hero as a companion. She had developed leadership skills through her role in program presentations, empathy through exposure to trauma survivors, and resilience through witnessing Rex's example of turning wounds into wisdom. Her academic performance consistently ranked among the district's highest, but teachers noted that her greatest strength was the ability to make other students feel valued and included. Emma has learned from Rex that strength is measured by how you help others, not by how you dominate them, observed her sixth-grade teacher, Mrs. Patterson. She's become a natural mediator who can diffuse conflicts and bring out the best in her classmates. The influence of that dog on her character development has been profound. Riverside itself had undergone its own transformation, evolving from a small town that nearly executed a hero into a community renowned for its coordination of Rex's program, into a consulting career that helped other communities develop their own therapeutic initiatives, his expertise sought by organizations nationwide. But he never strayed far from Riverside, understanding that his own healing remained connected to Rex's continued work and Emma's ongoing development into the remarkable young woman she was becoming. The awards and recognition that accumulated over the years filled an entire display case at the community center. Certificates from veterans organizations, commendations from educational associations, and media coverage that had made Rex's story known far beyond the borders of Texas. But the most meaningful tributes came from individuals whose lives had been touched by his work. Hand-drawn pictures from children who had learned about courage, letters from veterans who had found hope, and testimonials from families who had witnessed healing they had thought impossible. Rex's legacy had grown beyond his individual story to encompass a philosophy of service that recognized no expiration date, accepted no excuses, and measured success by lives improved rather than missions completed. The retired police officer had become a teacher, therapist, and inspiration whose influence would outlast his physical presence, ensuring that his example of loyal service would continue to inspire long after his final patrol had ended. As his 7th year in Riverside began, Rex maintained the alert bearing and professional dignity that had defined his entire career. But now these qualities were softened by contentment that came from knowing his life had mattered in ways both large and small. He had protected a child, healed a community, and built a legacy that would endure as testament to the power of love to overcome any betrayal, any abandonment, any wound that life might inflict upon those brave enough to serve others above themselves. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of the Rodriguez home, casting gentle patterns across the hardwood floor where Rex rested with the dignified calm of a warrior who had earned his peace. At 12 years old, the German Shepherd bore the marks of a life fully lived. His once jet-black muzzle now silver with age, his powerful frame slightly diminished, but still carrying the unmistakable bearing of professional excellence. The injury that had ended his police career had settled into a manageable ache that he navigated with the wisdom of experience, his movements deliberate rather than explosive, careful rather than reckless. Emma Rodriguez, now 16, and possessed of her mother's compassionate intelligence, combined with Rex's unwavering determination, sat cross-legged beside her lifelong companion, while reviewing veterinary school application materials. The stack of brochures and catalogs on the coffee table represented dreams that had taken shape through years of watching. Veterinary medicine specializing in animal therapy had surprised no one who knew the depth of her bond with the dog, who had shaped her understanding of service, sacrifice, and unconditional love. "Texas A&M has the best veterinary program in the state," Emma mused aloud, knowing that Rex's alert ears would track every word, even if his eyes remained closed in apparent slumber. "Dr. Coleman says they're starting a new specialization in therapeutic animal training. I could learn everything about helping dogs like you find their purpose after trauma." Rex's tail thumped once against the floor, his standard acknowledgement of approval that had become family language over the years. The German Shepherd's mind remained as sharp as ever, his ability to read human emotion and respond appropriately undiminished by age or accumulated fatigue. If anything, maturity had refined his intuitive abilities, allowing him to gauge needs and provide comfort with an efficiency that amazed the medical professionals who continued to work with him. Dr. Sofia Rodriguez watched the interaction between her daughter and their four-legged family member with the bittersweet awareness that time was becoming precious in ways she didn't want to acknowledge. Rex's latest veterinary examination had revealed the inevitable toll of age and service. Arthritis in the hip, where concrete debris had crushed him years ago, the beginning of kidney function decline that was typical in older German Shepherds, and a heart murmur that spoke of a cardiovascular system that had worked overtime throughout his career. "He's still got good quality of life," Dr. Martinez had assured them during Rex's monthly checkup. "Pain management is keeping him comfortable, and his cognitive function remains excellent. But we need to be realistic about adjusting his activity level to match his physical limitations." Those adjustments had been implemented gradually. Rex's therapeutic work reduced from 5 sessions per week to 2, his school visits limited to nearby districts that didn't require extensive travel. But the reduction in quantity had somehow enhanced the quality of his interactions, each encounter carrying the concentrated wisdom of a professional who understood that his time for active service was drawing to a close. The daily routines that structured Rex's retirement reflected his acceptance of age without surrender to irrelevance. Morning walks through the neighborhood had become gentler affairs, Rex setting a pace that acknowledged his limitations while maintaining the alertness that had defined his entire career. He still conducted perimeter checks of the Rodriguez property each evening, still positioned himself strategically during Emma's study sessions, still monitored the household security with the dedication of someone whose sense of purpose remained undiminished by physical constraints. His afternoon naps had grown longer and deeper, but they were the rest of contentment rather than exhaustion, the sleep of someone who had found peace with his life's accomplishments and his place in the world. The couch in the living room had become his preferred resting spot, positioned to maintain visual surveillance of the front door while staying close to the family activities that had become his primary mission. The medications that managed Rex's arthritis and supported his organ function were administered with the same precision that had once characterized his police work, Emma taking responsibility for the twice-daily routine that kept her companion comfortable. The ritual had become another bonding opportunity, Rex accepting pills hidden in treats with the patient cooperation of someone who trusted his caregivers completely. Miguel Santos visited regularly, their friendship having evolved into something that transcended the mentor-student relationship that had first brought them together. Now, both aging warriors, they shared the understanding that came from having served their communities faithfully and finding reward in the simple satisfaction of duty completed with honor. Their conversations during these visits were often conducted in comfortable silence, two veterans who had learned to communicate through presence rather than words. "He's made peace with getting older," Miguel observed during one such visit, watching Rex navigate the back porch steps with careful dignity. "Some dogs fight age like it's an enemy. Rex treats it like another mission parameter to work around." Emma had begun documenting Rex's story with the thoroughness of someone who understood that legends required preservation. Her bedroom walls displayed a chronological photo essay that tracked Rex's journey, from Dallas police officer to abandoned stray to beloved family member to celebrated therapy dog. The images captured not just his external transformation, but the evolution of his purpose, showing a professional who had learned that service could take many forms while maintaining its essential meaning. The local newspaper had featured Rex in a retrospective article titled "From Hero to Healer," documenting his contributions to both individual lives and community character. The response from readers had been overwhelming, letters pouring in from veterans he had helped, children he had inspired, and fellow service dogs whose handlers recognized the standard of excellence he had maintained throughout his varied career. As winter approached and Rex prepared for what everyone secretly understood might be his final holiday season with the family, his contentment was evident in the relaxed way he occupied space and time. The hypervigilance that had once defined his professional life had softened into watchful care, the warrior's readiness transformed into grandfather's wisdom. He had found the peace that eluded many who served others, the satisfaction of knowing that his life had mattered in ways both profound and simple. The forgotten hero had built a lasting legacy, and the wounded warrior had discovered that healing others could heal oneself in ways that no medical treatment could achieve. The pediatric intensive care unit at Austin Children's Hospital hummed with a controlled urgency that characterized environments where medical miracles competed daily with heartbreaking tragedy. Rex arrived on a Tuesday morning in November, his therapeutic vest slightly loose around a frame that had diminished noticeably over the past month, but his professional bearing intact as he prepared for what Dr. Coleman privately suspected might be his final major intervention. The case that had prompted the emergency consultation involved 7-year-old Marcus Williams, a car accident victim whose physical injuries had healed while his psychological trauma had resisted every conventional treatment approach the hospital's staff could offer. Marcus hadn't spoken since regaining consciousness 3 weeks earlier, his silence so complete that medical professionals had begun questioning whether the head injury had caused neurological damage that conventional tests couldn't detect. But Dr. Sarah Kim, the child psychologist overseeing his case, suspected something different, trauma so profound that the boy had simply decided the world wasn't safe enough to engage with anymore. His parents kept a constant vigil beside his bed, their faces bearing the hollow expression of people watching their child disappear into a place they couldn't reach. "He responds to basic physical stimuli," Dr. Kim explained to Rex's team as they prepared for the session. "Follows simple commands, maintains eye contact briefly, but he hasn't voluntarily communicated with anyone. Traditional play therapy, art therapy, even music therapy haven't elicited any meaningful response. We're hoping that Rex's presence might somehow break through whatever barrier Marcus has constructed." Emma Rodriguez, now serving as Rex's official handler for complex cases, knelt beside the German Shepherd, and made the final adjustments to his therapeutic equipment. At 16, she had developed intuitive understanding of Rex's methods that complemented formal training with emotional intelligence that couldn't be taught in classrooms. Her plans for veterinary school had evolved to include specialized study in animal-assisted therapy, inspired by witnessing Rex's extraordinary ability to reach people that traditional medicine couldn't help. Rex approached Marcus's room with the careful deliberation that characterized all his therapeutic work, his pace adjusted to accommodate both his own physical limitations and the delicate nature of the situation he was about to enter. The child lay motionless in the hospital bed, his small form dwarfed by medical equipment that monitored vital signs while providing mechanical support for functions that should have been automatic. His eyes remained open but vacant, staring at nothing, while his mind remained locked behind walls that no adult key could open. The German shepherd positioned himself beside Marcus's bed with the patience that had made him legendary among medical staff who had witnessed his work over the years. He didn't attempt immediate contact or dramatic gestures. Instead, he simply existed in the same space as the traumatized child, offering presence without pressure, companionship without demands. His breathing created a steady rhythm that somehow seemed to synchronize with the hospital room's mechanical sounds, transforming clinical noise into something approaching comfort. For 45 minutes, nothing happened. Marcus continued his 1,000-yard stare, while Rex maintained his vigil, both of them existing in a bubble of shared silence that excluded the anxious adults who watched from the doorway. Dr. Kim checked her watch repeatedly, wondering if this intervention would join the long list of approaches that had failed to penetrate the boy's psychological fortress. Then Marcus blinked, not the mechanical reflex that had characterized his eye movements for weeks, but a deliberate action that suggested conscious awareness. His gaze shifted from the ceiling to Rex's face, and for the first time since the accident, his eyes showed recognition that he wasn't alone in the world. "Dog," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible after weeks of silence. "Big dog." Rex's tail wagged once, a controlled expression of acknowledgement that communicated volumes about his understanding of the breakthrough moment they had just witnessed. He moved slightly closer to the bed, close enough for Marcus to touch if the boy chose to reach out, but not so close as to violate the personal space the trauma victims needed to maintain. Marcus's hand emerged from beneath the hospital blanket with trembling uncertainty, his small fingers extending toward Rex's graying muzzle with the cautious hope of someone testing whether the world might actually contain something safe and gentle. When contact came, it was electric, not just the physical touch between boy and dog, but the connection between two beings who had been broken by circumstances beyond their control and were now discovering that healing was possible. "He's warm," Marcus observed with wonder, his voice growing stronger with each word. "He's real." Emma felt tears building behind her eyes as she watched Rex work his final miracle, understanding that she was witnessing the culmination of everything that had made her guardian angel special throughout their years together. The German shepherd's exhaustion was evident in his careful movements and the way he leaned against the bed for support, but his focus remained absolute as he provided whatever Marcus needed to find his way back to the land of the living. Dr. Kim stepped forward carefully, not wanting to disrupt the fragile connection that had been established. Marcus replied with the startling clarity that sometimes emerged from profound trauma. "He knows about being scared. But he's not scared anymore."
so maybe I don't have to be scared either. The medical team that had gathered to observe Rex's final intervention understood they were witnessing something that would influence their approach to pediatric trauma treatment for years to come. The German Shepherd had accomplished what teams of specialists couldn't achieve, using nothing more than presence, patience, and the hard-won wisdom that came from his own journey through darkness back into light. As the session concluded and Rex prepared for the journey back to Riverside, his exhaustion was evident to everyone who knew him well. The final mission had required everything he had left to give, and the cost was written in the careful way he moved and the deeper lines of fatigue around his wise eyes. But the satisfaction of success was equally evident. Rex had ended his active career the way he had lived it, serving others regardless of personal cost, and proving that love could triumph over even the most devastating trauma. Emma helped him into the van for the drive home, understanding that they had just witnessed the end of an era and the completion of a legacy that would inspire others long after Rex's working days had ended. The December morning when Rex's final chapter began was crystalline clear, the kind of Texas winter day that seemed designed for peaceful endings and gentle transitions. Rex had awakened in his favorite spot on the living room couch with an unusual stillness about him, his breathing shallow but steady, his eyes alert, but carrying a quality that Emma recognized with the intuitive understanding that had connected them for 9 years. She called in sick to school without explanation, understanding that some moments were too important for normal routines, too sacred for anything but complete presence. Dr. Sofia Rodriguez arrived home from her hospital shift to find her daughter and their 4-legged family member sharing what felt like a final vigil, Rex's head resting in Emma's lap while her gentle hands stroked his graying fur with the reverence reserved for saying goodbye to someone who had shaped the very foundation of her character. The veterinarian's assessment was gentle but clear. Rex's body was finally surrendering to the accumulated toll of years spent in service to others, his organs beginning the shutdown process that would carry him peacefully toward whatever waited beyond the responsibilities of earthly guardianship. "How long do we have?" Emma asked, her voice steady despite tears that had been flowing since dawn. "Hours, maybe a day." Dr. Martinez replied softly, "His vitals are stable for now, but he's made his decision. We can keep him comfortable, but this is his time to choose when and how his..." Everyone's business became everyone's concern. By afternoon, a gentle stream of visitors had begun arriving at the Rodriguez house, neighbors and friends who understood that Rex's passing would mark the end of an era for their town, as much as their family. Miguel Santos stood silent guard on the front porch, his own emotions too raw for words, while he coordinated the informal receiving line that wanted to pay final respects to the dog who had taught them all about courage, loyalty, and the power of second chances. Captain James Morrison made the 6-hour drive from Dallas when Miguel called with the news, arriving just as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The reunion between Rex and his original handler was wordless but profound. 8 years of separation collapsing into a moment of recognition that transcended time and circumstance. Morrison knelt beside the couch where Rex lay and placed his weathered hand on the German Shepherd's head, his voice thick with emotion when he finally spoke. "Thank you, partner," Morrison whispered, "for everything, for saving my life, for teaching me about loyalty, for becoming everything I knew you could be. You were the best dog I ever worked with, the best partner I ever had." Rex's tail moved slightly against the cushions, a final acknowledgement of the bond that had begun their story together and would outlast the physical limitations that were bringing it to its close. His breathing remained steady, but had taken on the quality that medical professionals recognized as the body's preparation for final release. Each inhalation and exhalation marking time toward an ending that would be peaceful rather than tragic. Emma had been composing her thoughts throughout the day, understanding that some promises needed to be spoken aloud to carry weight beyond the moment of their making. As evening approached, and Rex's condition remained stable but clearly declining, she leaned close to his ear and spoke with the clarity of someone whose life direction had been shaped by extraordinary friendship. "I'm going to become a canine trainer, Rex," she whispered. "I'm going to help other dogs like you find families who understand how special they are. I'm going to make sure no hero ever gets abandoned again. That's my promise to you. Your story doesn't end with you." Rex's eyes opened slightly at her words, and for a moment the old alertness returned, the professional acknowledgement of mission parameters understood and accepted. He had trained Emma well, taught her everything she knew, sheltered her fears, comforted her sorrows, and taught her that heroes came in all forms, not just the ones that human stories typically celebrated. The funeral that followed 3 days later was unlike anything Riverside had ever witnessed. A full police honors ceremony that brought canine units from across Texas to pay respects to one of their own. The flag-draped casket was carried by officers who understood that Rex had represented the best of what their profession could achieve, while the community that had once been prepared to destroy him now gathered to celebrate a life that had touched every corner of their collective experience. Rex was buried in Riverside Memorial Park, beneath the same oak tree where Miguel had first recognized his true nature. A bronze plaque marking the spot where visitors could come to remember that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but action taken despite it. The memorial quickly became a pilgrimage site for law enforcement officers, veterans, and therapy dog handlers who understood that some stories transcended individual lives to become inspiration for entire professions. Emma Rodriguez enrolled in Texas A&M's veterinary program the following fall. Her application essay about Rex's influence becoming legendary among admissions counselors who recognized authentic passion when they encountered it. Her specialty in animal-assisted therapy and canine training would eventually establish programs in 12 states, each one carrying Rex's legacy forward into new communities where heroes waited to be recognized rather than abandoned. On the day Emma graduated from veterinary school, she drove to Rex's grave, carrying a photograph that showed her standing beside a group of German Shepherd puppies in training, their eager faces looking toward the camera with the same alert intelligence that had first marked Rex as extraordinary. She placed the photo beside the memorial plaque and spoke the words that completed a circle begun 9 years earlier with abandoned dog and a lonely little girl who had found each other when both needed salvation. "We did it, Rex. We kept the promise. Your story lives on." The wind that rustled through the oak leaves seemed to carry approval from somewhere beyond the boundaries of earthly service,
a final acknowledgement from a hero whose greatest victory had been teaching others that love was stronger than abandonment, hope more powerful than despair, and that true service never really ended. It just passed from one generation to the next, carrying forward the eternal truth that some bonds transcend even death itself. Rex's story reminds us of something profound: the extraordinary bond between humans and our four-legged companions runs deeper than words can express. German shepherds, like Rex, possess an almost mystical ability to read our hearts, to know when we need comfort, protection, or simply our souls, the keepers of our deepest trust. Every dog has the potential to be someone's Rex, a protector, a healer, a source of joy that transforms ordinary moments into treasures. The connection we share with our dogs isn't just companionship. It's a sacred partnership that enriches both lives immeasurably. If Rex's story touched your heart and you'd like to strengthen the bond with your own faithful companion, there's a gentle resource I've discovered that honors the intelligence and emotional depth dogs possess. It's helped many people communicate more meaningfully with their four-legged family members, not through force or commands, but through understanding and respect. You might find it worth exploring when you're ready.